Brian, first to you. I suppose now, with Biden out, Donald Trump is the oldest person to ever be the nominee for president. Are you expecting the Democrats to go to town on that point?
Yes, I think that's now going to be one of the major themes of this election. It was already age because of Biden's age. Trump, for all of his faults, has aged differently than Biden in recent years. But if you go back and watch Trump's convention speech, he does sound diminished compared to 2020 and compared to 2016. We are going to hear Democrats point that out again and again, that Trump is too old and too reckless to be president. And now, of course, this is a campaign of contrasts. Rather than having two octogenarians on the ticket, two elderly men, now it's a real campaign of contrast.
There's a lot we don't know about this campaign, though. Tia, Vice President Kamala Harris seems to be racking up endorsements by the hour, but not from everyone, particularly not the party elders like Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi. What's the strategy there?
Well, I think some of the strategy is just these party elders have already taken a lot of heat for reportedly being really active behind the scenes and encouraging President Biden to step aside. And so I think those same party elders are now trying to be really careful about how they move forward. I don't think any of them are against Kamala Harris becoming the party's nominee, but I think they're sensitive to some of the perception that they were the ones who muscled Biden out, and therefore they want to be sensitive to not causing further harm, as now the big goal of the Democratic Party is to get unified around whether it's Vice President Harris most likely, but whoever is the party nominee. And so that's what I think their silence is about, not necessarily a judgment on the vice president.
That's interesting. I mean, could it also be, Brian, a little bit of this is still a democratic process, this is not a coronation, the delegates have to make their own decision?
Yes, definitely. Going back to the Republican argument, Republicans are saying this is a coup. Biden's been overthrown. The Democrats are installing whoever they want. This is the regime acting. It doesn't actually seem to be that way. This was a decision that Biden reached after weeks of pressure. And frankly, it was the low poll numbers that were probably the most important factor for him. Looking at polls in swing states and seeing that he was not just losing, but he was collapsing. But when it comes to Kamala Harris now, it is important to have a real process play out. It's important for voters to see that there is a process playing out. But I am impressed by how many people have endorsed Harris in the last few hours. There has been a deluge of endorsements. You're right, it's not Obama, it's not Pelosi, but many, many Democratic leaders are coming behind her, including most of the people who would be considered to be her vice presidential pick. So there is very much an effort underway to show unity within the party.
And Tia, Republicans are making the argument, and they made it very quickly, that if Joe Biden isn't fit to run for re-election, then he's just not fit to remain as president. Where does that argument go? And I wonder, is there any concern that the enemies of the United States, for example, will take advantage of this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what a narrative we're hearing from Republicans, that Biden's decision today weakens his presidency. But I think most American people consider it two different things. It's one thing to say, yes, he's got 4 months left on his term, or 5 months at this point. Can he continue that, finish out what he started, versus asking for another 4 years on top of that? But I do think, there are critics who are going to say, is he unfit? But again, we're talking about 5 months. We're not talking about and quite frankly, 5 months that includes a lame duck term after the election. So I don't know if Republicans are going to be very successful in convincing Joe Biden that he should step aside. There's also a lot of, again, it's easier said than done. If Joe Biden were to step aside and let Kamala Harris become president, then you've got to have a confirmation process, again, for a very short lame duck term. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, honestly, for him to step aside unless something, I think, happens health-wise where he believes that he cannot fulfill his duties. But again, we've been hearing from Joe Biden for the past month since that debate that he doesn't necessarily think he can't fulfill the duties. I think his decision today was, like Brian said, the writing on the walls, the cratering poll results, not so much that Biden himself decided he could not do it.
So we're already seeing, you're talking about the Republican reaction, we're already seeing Trump talk about possible debate with Harris, arguing, hey, this debate should move to Fox, right? This historically Trump-friendly network. What does that tell you, Brian, about what is happening within the Trump camp now?
Trump seems a little bit scared. He doesn't know how to react. His campaign doesn't seem to know how to react to this Sunday shocker. Even though it's been predicted for weeks, we know that the Trump team wanted to be running against Biden. That's what they're modeling in their campaign, and everything is structured against Biden. Now it's all been blown up. That's why this is one of the most interesting days in American political history. Everything has suddenly changed. This is not about two old white guys trying to run a rematch anymore. Americans didn't want that. And now they actually are getting something new. With the newness comes a lot of uncertainty, including for Trump. So yeah, Trump's backing out of that ABC debate in September. He says he wants it to be on Fox instead. I think Kamala Harris is going to come out and say, sure, I'll debate you anytime, anywhere, including on your home network, Fox. It's in her interest to have more debates with Trump. It's in her interest to be out there being the prosecutor against the convicted felon.
Lots of names out there about people who might challenge Kamala Harris. At this point, though, Tia, I mean, who, if she's the big shark in the water, who else is going to dip their toe in that water?
I mean, I think there are plenty of people who, A, want to be part of what they feel is this effort to preserve democracy by keeping former President Trump from returning to the White House. And so they feel that sense of duty. But there's also those political aspirations. There are a lot of upsides to running on the ticket in this short term. You won't be blamed if the ticket doesn't win, because this was kind of an 11th hour change. You can get your name out there, increase your name recognition, and make you even stronger should Trump win and it become this open race again in 2028. So we're looking at a lot of the governors in swing states. And let's be honest, I think we're looking at more than likely a white person, more than likely a white male, because there is concern about misogyny and racism affecting support for Vice President Harris. So I think we can expect a white male to kind of to speak to the anxiety that perhaps some voters may have about a Black woman, a woman of color at the top of the ticket. But again, those swing states, so Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro, North Carolina Governor Cooper, and even Kentucky's not a swing state, but the fact that Kentucky is a red state with a Democratic governor who can speak to rural America puts Andy Beshear, for example, in the mix as well.
I keep hearing the name Mark Kelly from Arizona as well. All these people who I think were also being mentioned as potential top of the ticket, maybe they just moved their resumes down to be potential running mates, possibly. We don't have much time left. So, Brian, if I could just throw to you one last thought. What on earth are you looking for now? In the timeline of what needs to happen next, what are we watching for?
We're watching for how much support consolidates behind Harris, whether anyone like Joe Manchin decides to actually challenge her ahead of the convention, who she picks to be VP, and then what Trump's attacks lines will be. This is American history in action, though. Hillary Clinton 8 years ago tried to become the first woman president. She barely lost to Donald Trump. And now here we are 8 years later. A woman of color is once again in this position to challenge a man that many Americans think is racist and sexist. This is a battle for what America is and who are Americans, and can there actually be equality in the United States? Honestly, I think this is a much more interesting and important election than it was 12 hours ago.
Wow, interesting. Brian Stelter, Tia Mitchell, thank you both for all your analysis over the past 400 years.